Well, hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Risk Matrix. We're at 101. Thank you, everybody, for coming last week to our 100th episode live, where we gave out all kinds of goodies. And for those of you that got some of those goodies, make sure that if you haven't given your address or contact information yet to our producers, please do that so that they can get that stuff out to you. But we're here today with episode 101, myself, Dr. Martin, and James Junkin. Hey, James.
Hey, roll tide. Good to be back. What a great episode last week. 100th episode. Can't wait till we get to 200.
It's gonna go by fast. The first 100 went by fast.
Didn't it, though?
So here we are today. We're still powered by VeriForce. Thank you, VeriForce, for powering every single episode of this Risk Matrix podcast and having faith in us to get the word out on different aspects of risk and safety in the work environment. But we do have a sponsor. I'm going to let that go to James, and James is going to tell you who's sponsoring us today.
We are being sponsored by the VeriForce booth, number 1201 at the American Society of Safety Professionals Conference coming up July 22nd through the 24th in Orlando. I will be speaking in a session on that Thursday. Rumble in the jungle, baby. Safety versus procurement. So check out the list, the itinerary. Come by and see me in my session. Be glad to meet you there. And also stop by the booth. There'll be a lot of interesting people from VeriForce there at the booth number 1201 in the expo hall.
Thank you, James. And today we have a guest. Safety starts with access. David Joerring joins us to explore supporting worker well-being and how it reduces job site risk and helps subcontractors stay safe, healthy, and on the tools. Welcome, David. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to be part of 101 on the path to episode 200, starting the first one after 100. Really, yeah, excited to be here with you.
So can you tell us a little bit, give us a little background first, David, of who you are and who you're with. I know you're with HealthKey. I think I've got that right. But how did you come to HealthKey, and what does HealthKey bring to the market of risk and safety?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of HealthKey, and my background didn't start in healthcare. I started my career as a lawyer, then became a management consultant. And that's how I got into the health industry. And then the last too many years now worked in health technology, primarily in and around diagnostics, and built HealthKey after seeing the possibility of delivering more access to health services through scalable technologies. So around telehealth or remote testing or remote diagnostics. And what we set out to do with HealthKey was integrate some of the great different health providers and well-being providers who build fantastic point solutions so that employers can have access, employees can have access to quite a wide range of different services, but in an easy way. So I think like a lot of people will experience a sort of platform fatigue if you've got a lot of different suppliers, you've got a lot of different logins, things don't necessarily get used as much. And particularly when it comes to health and well-being, access is sort of step one, but the value only happens when people actually use them.
Right.
And so what we do is make that journey as easy as possible, pull together those best-in-class providers, whether that's mental health, diagnostics, telehealth, MSK services, and then find out who are the experts, what's the right plan for an organization, and then help bring that to the employees and make it alive and try to really increase the utilization and the engagement with these services so that both the employees and the organizations actually get the value from those programs that they have.
So I think that's pretty interesting because, we're often, Dr. Martin and I are safety professionals, but you see it expressed in different acronyms and around the world, EHS professionals, HSE professionals. And really, I think we probably, in in practice just need to call ourselves S, because we're not very strong on the environmental, and many times we're not very strong on the health. So I think this will be an interesting conversation for our listeners on how to enhance their practices and services that they're providing for worker well-being in the workplace. But let me ask you this. This is very interesting to me, but how did you come to this focus on perhaps simplifying healthcare access, particularly for, contractors within the supply chain of a hiring client, and especially for the benefits of those frontline workers?
So I think it was two things. One was, and it's so it comes back to the distinction you're making there around sort of the safety and the health side, because when we think about the link between health and risk, we see that there's twofold. One is the direct, what is someone's health and their health is at risk, but the other is the how does poor health impact risk on a wider scale. And what sort of realized when I was working in a diagnostic space was particularly frontline workers and on site, so people might be away from home, have a higher level of risk related to healthcare. So high stress environments, maybe generally poor access, but also this twofold risk element where, unlike workers where you sit at a desk and the risk to your health is what we sort of normal health risks, your lifestyle and genetics. But actually with frontline staff, there's the added risk of, if I have mental health issues or I've got a bad back, that might impact my ability to perform the task that I need to do, which impacts business risk. It impacts the risk to my coworkers. And working in a technology space, looking at sort of scalable solutions, how can we get more people to access this? What interested me was this frontline or high risk environments, is that double impact, where if you can use different technological tools to bring better access to people, it helps both the individual, but also directly the business in reducing risk, whether that's productivity risk, it's incident risk, or risk to coworkers. And I mean, how it came to be specifically that area, I think really started during the pandemic, and started seeing how working a lot with frontline workers. So all the people who we really got to see who of us can work from home and what is not needed. And then there's a lot of people where, well, if you don't show up, the world stops.
Right.
And we can't just stay at home, and you can have PPE, but there was a real, I think, realization across the world that, well, we really need to do more to protect people who have to be on site. And if someone can't show up, whether that is back pain or they're ill for any reason, it has a very real impact. And so what started with how do you protect people during a pandemic really evolved into how do you protect people generally. It's not just a pandemic risk, there's lots of different health risks that will impact the workplace and the employees.
So David, originally in this conversation, you talked a little bit about people having tons of passwords and different points of access and all these different things. And what I'm imagining is that the HealthKey, because to me, HealthKey is like, okay, one point of access, right? And underneath point of access, there are these services, right? So can we kind of unpack a little bit about the one point of access idea, but then also how you integrate the services underneath that in order to give the feeling of one well-being, right? And I don't know if I'm saying that right. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but you get that point of access and that you've got that one well-being. And then beyond that, how can employers use that data that they're gathering if these, they get their workers on board with this? How are they going to use this data to make a better workplace?
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot there. In terms of that sort of one point of access, you can think of it as at the organizational level, it's finding out what are the right point solutions. And I think one of the challenges that a lot of people will have is in a procurement exercise, you look for what's the one provider, what are the one or two or three providers that we need that can cover our needs. But actually, what we see is that the best providers are focused. They will have different areas of expertise. So having too many for your passwords is helpful. And so we have the organizational layer, which is sort of a one-to-many procurement and clinical due diligence. So we do the clinical due diligence, we do the procurement, and then you have the access point for the actual employees. So it is exactly as you say, it is one point of access. And we then integrate with the different providers. So as an employee, I'll be able to log in and see these are the different things, but not split necessarily by who's providing it, but split by needs. So, and part of that is the difference in information in healthcare is often quite wide. So something clinically, we split things into different areas, but from a patient or an employee perspective, most of us don't think about health or well-being in the areas that they are in clinically. We think of it as, I'm not sleeping well, or I have back pain. And so some of the work we do is how do you get someone in, whether that's through a search or clicking different interests, make that available and say, okay, if this is what you're looking for, these are the things that you have available, regardless of who might actually be providing that. Because the challenge you see, if you start by saying someone needs to first log into the specific platform for a specific health area, you're already relying on the fact that someone, even to the extent of knowing, well, what part of what's a preventive screening versus what's the primary care versus what's my mental health, and anxiety could be from a lot of different things. It could be financial anxiety, it could be family stress, and it might not be the same place I need to go for those. So, and I wouldn't say we've solved this, but a lot of the work that we do is trying to work out what is the right way to guide someone to the services that they have access to, and how can we help someone understand that without trying to overcomplicate it with basically without having to try to educate someone in a non-clinical job into what does the clinical workflow look like. Just get them to the best care as easy as possible.
So let me ask you this, and I buy into this. If you don't think your workers' health is important, have a key employee go down and not be able to come to work for 2 months. You'll find out,
yeah.
right? And in many cases, I am the key employee. And if I could go back in time to younger me, I would like to tell younger me, hey, man, live like one day there'll be an older me. Okay?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't always follow that advice, and I'm reaping some of the results of it now. But when you're talking to companies, to CEOs about thinking differently about worker health, how do you overcome, hey, man, we have workers' compensation. So if they get injured on the job, we offer as a part of an employee benefits package, really good company supplied health insurance. How do you get them to say, look, maybe that's not enough, we need to do more?
So I think it's actually very close to what you're talking about with the sort of how do I take care of future me? Because the way that most health benefits are currently done is it's fairly reactive. So you're looking at workers' comp or it's the insurance side, but it's not proactive. And if you're looking at things like injuries or the things that take us out for longer in terms of illness, it usually starts way earlier. So something that becomes a musculoskeletal incident, it might actually come from repetitive tasks or monotonous tasks that you've done over and over and over again. And then it's looking at, well, you've got, when something happens, there's the cost of the direct health intervention. So what does that cost? Whether that's the insurance, whether it's a self-insured organization, what does that cost? What does it cost in terms of the time that someone's out of work? You need to replace them. And particularly in these fields, it's not easy to just have someone with potentially quite specialized knowledge just go, well, I've got surgery and I'm going to be out for a couple of months. So that's, opportunity cost and replacing them. And then comparing that to what's the cost of preventive measures. And so what we do is look at what are some really scalable solutions that where on a per enrolled employee, you could do a subscription that gives them access to ongoing physio support, ongoing mental health support. We like to think of primary care as mixed with the preventive. So not just being able to call the doctor when you're sick, but having checkups, having someone help you actually with that. How do I protect future me? Whether that's nutrition or lifestyle or sleep, because we all need that help and that nudge to go, okay, I'm feeling all right now, but I could probably feel better. And that's not going to help, not just going to help me right now. It's going to help me a lot in 6 months, in a year, and 5 years, which is really where employers start to reap those benefits. But then it's also, I think it would be interesting from the sort of risk and safety side is also when you look at things like mental health, whether that's stress or anxiety, but also pain, which a lot of people will walk around with just small levels of pain for a long period of time. It has a direct impact on our cognitive functions. So even so slightly, but it impacts our ability to make sort of accuracy speed trade-offs. And if you're in a high-risk environment, a lot of what you do is accuracy speed trade-offs. You've got to make decisions. You've got to make them in a fast-paced environment. And see a lot of studies where mental health symptoms, different kinds, have a negative impact on that in a similar way that drinking does, or being very tired does. And so it's back to your question, how do we talk to CEOs, CFOs about this? It's looking at what's the direct cost you have right now in terms of health. What does that compare to what we can do preventively? Then what are all the indirect costs that you're not thinking about, which is people are out, you got a replacement, you got incident risk, you've got sort of fitness per task. And when you start to stack those together, it makes quite a compelling case for these preventive measures because they're also a lot cheaper than having to deal with something when it happens.
When I start to smile, that I got something on my mind, and it's either good or bad for you, David. So you can be the judge. I'm listening to you give an answer to James. Basically, traditionally, how we do ROI in safety, right? Cost, benefit, direct costs, indirect costs, et cetera, et cetera. I'm the researcher here. I think James would agree. James is a researcher too, but not on the same level playing field right now. So it occurs to me that if you had a few companies that bought into what you're selling, to the HealthKey and this, right, that wouldn't it be great if you could build in a formula in there that can calculate these costs and actually bring up what the cost savings are, what the return on investment is for not only the employee but the company, right? I'd love to see something like that in my pie in the sky world, because it would give proof of concept of what you're doing. Now I don't know if that's possible, but it seems to me that this would be a great, if you had 2 or 3 companies, a great test case to see, can you do what you just told us with some kind of, algorithm.
100%. Yeah, because at the moment, that's very much sort of, it's a work in progress, right? We take the data that we can, what are the costs that people have at the moment? There's a lot of assumptions in there, but as the more and more companies using it, getting smarter on that and being able to forecast that ROI and then prove it as things go, 100%. And so it's one of those work in progress, and love to get your thoughts because it's
I have some thoughts. I have some more thoughts if you want to hear.
100%.
I mean, if you have this platform, right, and you have the ability to track the things that you're trying to get people to go and do for their health and well-being, right, or to access. You mentioned pain levels, right? Just when they open the app, putting in their pain level for the day, or when they open the app, their fatigue level for the day, or whatever. And then tracking that over time and having that go into the algorithm as well would be just really kind of a neat thing. And I'd be willing to talk to you about this offline too, but like I see great benefit. The kicker here is getting those test cases on board, which I assume you have, and then making a case for getting this additional kind of just ancillary data. Just kind of, I feel good today. Happy face. You know how they have the pain scale: happy face, really
Yes.
happy face, sad face, right? And you're doing this, and you're putting it into an algorithm, and you're showing the worth of what you're doing as you're rolling down the road with the rollout.
Yeah, because I really like that, because it's interesting. So some of the best data, this is sort of slightly weird, but some of the best data on these you actually get from the populations who have one or more chronic conditions, because you've got constant tracking. And there it's quite easy to prove, because if someone has diabetes or hypertension or other chronic conditions, there's a more constant level of tracking. And that actually means that you get data to show, okay, these interventions.
You need those control groups too, though. You need the people
Exactly.
who are accessing the apps that don't have the but I don't want to get off track here, because it's my research brain is like, I'm going to get a hold of his data one way or the other. But I'll let James jump in here.
I want to jump in here because all I heard was great things about research data, and I didn't hear one word about privacy.
Well, absolutely.
Okay?
So that
as a worker, I need to make sure there's a firewall between you and the company, because I may not be willing to share all of my personal health issues. I'm feeling sad today, or fatigued today, or hey, I've got this chronic illness that I don't want anyone to know about, right? For fear of retribution within an organization. So how is that data protected to conform with the laws in both, the EU and the privacy laws in the US to protect the worker?
Exactly, and that's a really good reason why it's helpful. What we've seen is to have a platform where we sit almost in between the employer and the health services, because from an employee perspective, it's a complete sort of Chinese walls black box for the employer on a personal level. So you can gather data from the different providers, but that's not being done by an HR function or an employer. Whereas if they're contracting with multiple different providers, someone has to be doing that aggregation analysis across those different providers, which we're then able to do. And we can then provide aggregate insights back to an employer and say, these are the ROI impacts. This is where we can see you might need to invest more, or these are the interventions that aren't quite working that we need to change. But if you have just one provider, they might do that for their area. But then that goes back to employer that has to try to stitch that together, which means you're either getting an incomplete picture, or you have to, you've got to work with what you can get, and that isn't on an individual level. And it's one of those really important things. Also, as I said, we want to increase utilization of these services. And one of the key things is giving people the comfort that talking to a doctor, using different digital tools isn't going to be fed back to their employer. Because you want someone to start talking about their mental health or their worries about pre-existing conditions. And particularly when you talk about early intervention, that worry that, if I start talking about this now, maybe I get treated as if it's already happened, or do I get locked out of other services, and does this impact my outlook going forward? So then I'll just keep it back and hope it doesn't become a problem. And then lo and behold, 24 months from now, it has become a big problem. So you're exactly right. I think that that black box of information where we can aggregate together and do the analysis, provide analysis back to an employer, but they can rest assured, you can rest assured from an employee perspective that it's never on an individual basis.
You got a lot of disclaimers in there and a lot of language, click yes if you've read this, kind of thing. And,
Yes.
and there are ways to do it. We know we do it now, right? So is this something that you've seen big companies adopt, your service, or can smaller companies get in on this too? And if so, how?
So what we really try to do is make it available across the range. And so larger organizations will usually have more things in place already, so we can help plug the gaps, make integrations to some of those existing services, and bring it together both from analysis and access point of view. But for the smaller companies, we built a very self-serve platform where you go in, couple of clicks, what do we have, what do we need? And we've got companies down to 4 or 5 people where it's fairly self-serve. The challenge there is you can't really provide the same level of analysis if you've got 5 people, because you might aggregate it, but you start saying, well, one of your employees did X, so then we aggregate across all the organizations and find the back these trends within your industry. But we feel that the benefit that we see is with large organizations, or then almost like it's a network of organizations, means that we can procure better deals on that size, but then making it easy for small organizations as well to access that. They can benefit from that buying power of the network to access services that might otherwise either be priced out of or not have the integration tools. Or a lot of health networks of these digital health providers might have caps saying it's not from an account perspective worth it to do if it's too small a company. And that's where we've then got self-service tools to be able to join the platform.
Right. So what is one innovation or trend in the health tech that you're seeing that will transform the job site in the next 5 years? And you can't say HealthKey, you have to say something else.
I think one of the things that we're seeing a bigger trend of is the mix of digital and physical. So increasingly having blood devices or heart rate monitors or different devices sent to you, but talking to a doctor online and then tracking gradually. So I think traditional healthcare, very in person. You go, you see a doctor, everything's done in person. Hard when you're away on sites. It's costly, operationally heavy. And then for years, there's been a push towards more digital. We got telehealth services. And I think the trend at the moment is really the combining of the two, and seeing more and more providers finding that balance of how can you get the scalability and the access of the digital side, but also providing the quality of the care and the detail level that just requires some level of physical intervention, physical presence.
Right. Thank you.
I'm a big fan of telehealth. I've tried to stay with a local doctor, but he didn't move, I moved. But I like my doctor, right? But at one point it dawned on me I had not seen my doctor in 3 years because he's an hour and a half away. So when they came out with telehealth, I'm able to join him online in a meeting just like this through a proprietary app. Go locally for labs. I can get feedback, and I found that it fits in my schedule and probably others that are extremely busy schedule a lot better than going to a doctor's office, sitting there for an hour and a half for a general checkup. They're behind, I'm looking at my clock and that kind of thing. So I definitely think telehealth is going to be a way for the future. Let me ask you this, and then we'll switch over. We got a bunch of questions that are coming in. I want to get to those questions from some of our audience. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, what are 3 takeaways that you want the listeners of this episode to walk away with?
That's a great question. I probably should have prepared that one. I think the three takeaways. I think the first one is probably to think about health as integrally related to risk. So these are not, when we talk about health and safety, these aren't separate things. So the safety side impacts health, but it also goes the other direction. So our health, whether that is pain, mental health, pre-existing conditions, early signs of something, also relates back to risk in the workplace. So lower reaction times, or just lack of concentration, fitness for tasks. And so thinking about that interlink between health and safety, not as 2 sides of a job description, but actually very closely linked. I think that the second is we're seeing in this sort of to the trends at the moment, it moving from a reactive, not just to sort of more preventive, but what we think about as proactive healthcare. And so this is the to some extent it's a mix where you're sort of normally think of prevention, your annual checkup and doing things early, but proactively analyzing what are the risks, finding the right interventions, and working with people both on finding things way before it happens, changing lifestyles, but also following through for longer. So I've got an old shoulder injury, I go see a physiotherapist. There are then tools to then keep that rehabilitation going for a lot longer, because one of the things that will be unsurprising to many is once you've seen someone in a care pathway once, they're very likely to come back for the same thing. And actually, when that happens, you can model out fairly well, say, well, there's a really good cost benefit, impact benefit of proactively dealing with that more ongoing. So I think, so it's that second is sort of moving from the reactive, adding threat, but really proactively thinking about health benefit. And then I think as a final one is, to your point around telehealth, there is, we think about digital health as often as health apps on the well-being side or telehealth, but there are more and more digital health companies or tech solutions around a much wider range of health areas. And so I think for a lot of companies, when we start to talk to them about what's actually possible, there has been a lot of development in the last 5 years, and which really can help companies give more to their employees, particularly those who are fly in, fly out, or remote sites, which just wasn't possible 5 years ago, both also in terms of the price points that these things can now be delivered at.
And I just want to be clear, because some questions coming in. This is not in replacement to your workers' compensation insurance. This is not replacing what would be there for benefits for workers, healthcare for workers in the event of a workplace injury or illness. This is more reactive and supplemental to their individual healthcare. So if you've got some questions, drop them in the chat here in the time that we got remaining. But we have some that have come up from Don Kramer here, and he wants to go back and discuss some issues related to privacy. So he says, yes, James, privacy. Employees can be affected by exposing themselves and their health conditions. What are the organizational risks associated with this? Well, I'll tell you what the organizational risk is for this, at least in my experience, very expensive litigation. Okay. So that's one part. The other organizational risk is not explaining this properly and what you're doing properly, and that it's for the employee's benefit, and that there is this firewall between the information the employer receives and the information that the employee is giving up, it could actually be kind of productive to your organizational culture and cause more problems than it solves. So I think from a privacy concern, and we'll talk about the HIPAA side of this thing here in a moment, but I think for the privacy concern, as long as there are parameters in place that are verifiable and it's readily explained, this is nothing more than on-site healthcare now being transported to the internet sphere. I created a word, right? The World Wide Web, right? And additional benefits for workers. But anyway, just following up, throw it back to you. Thoughts on the risk that it poses to organizational culture?
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think it's key. There's the regulatory, there's the litigation risk, which is why it's so important to put those disclaimers we talked about in place and having those firewalls. I think from a culture perspective, that needs to be incredibly clear in the communication and the rollout, both because you risk creating a lack of uptake. So if people aren't completely clear and they don't have trust in the products, again, you're back to paying for something and not seeing any benefit as an organization, and your employees are not seeing any of the benefit. But it's also, it's a trust, and it's actually really being very transparent around what is it, what are the services, where's your data going, where's your data not going, and that the fact that the data is purely being used for the delivery of the health services and wider analysis. And we actually usually talk about really actually being clear about what that analysis is, because it is very interesting to organizations. And I think sometimes we see companies shy away from explaining what we mean when we talk about aggregate analysis. But for an employee perspective, they know that this is happening and it is beneficial to improve services. Actually giving them that information and saying, so this is how, this is what that is, and being completely transparent with it, it's helpful to build that trust. Say, okay, of course, when I share data with doctor to help them bring the services, that doctor will also aggregate across people and say, okay, we are seeing trends, so we need to do interventions.
Yeah,
and
there's a big difference between targeted information and trends. Right.
Well, and that kind of goes back to another question that we had. This is a whole episode. Probably the most misunderstood law out there is HIPAA. HIPAA applies to healthcare providers and the information that they can disclose, right? So if you're concerned about violating HIPAA related to this, that is on the doctor, not on you as a safety professional. But regardless of what the law is, I think it's really good, the points that you and Dr. Martin pointed out about approaching this as a benefit, that any data we received is in the aggregate and only designed to improve our health and wellness programs here. We're not getting a copy of your private medical record where we can
nor do we want them.
Nor do we want it.
That's
and
right.
I think part of that is also, for us, it's the ability to roll out a benefit without having to ask the employer for information, personal information about the employees.
Right.
So they can enroll, and we don't have specific enrollment periods. They can be at any time, but any information they share is on explicit consent. So they'll be asked for different health information to receive a service, but it's on consent every time.
Yeah.
And it's the employee providing it. So you don't have that saying, well, employers being asked for information, what can they share, what can't they share, and all of that happens as part of the onboarding on a personal level. And when it's needed, not give us a lot of data up front, and you don't know where it's going, but actually at the point where it's relevant.
That's right. Well, on that note, David, thank you for joining us today and diving into why safety starts with access. If people want to get a hold of you at HealthKey, how do they connect to you?
So one option, my email is david@healthkey.health. We're also a Veriforce Hub partner, so anyone wants access to that, we are listed on that, or our website, healthkey.health.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If you guys enjoyed this episode, grab the replay at Veriforce/the Risk Matrix podcast and share it with your colleagues, share it with your mama. Don't forget to subscribe to the Risk Matrix podcast wherever you download your podcasts, so you never miss an episode. James, take us out.
Hey, contractor safety done. Catch us at booth 1201 down in Orlando for ASSP. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for all that have made the past 100 episodes successful. We look forward to the next 100. Like, share, comment on our particular podcast post that you see on LinkedIn. Until next time, you keep bringing those workers home safe from high hazard jobs, and roll tide.
Roll Tide.
Are you planning to attend ASSP Safety 2025 in Orlando this July? We'll be there July 22nd to 24th at booth 1201. Stop by to connect with industry experts and explore smarter solutions for contractor management, compliance, and training. Don't miss James JUNKIN and our expert speakers tackling hot topics like procurement versus safety. Let's build safer workplaces together.